Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. For the past 6 years, I've been renting the same modest 3-bedroom house. It's nothing fancy, just a 1970s ranch-style home with good bones, a decent-sized yard, and enough charm to make it feel like home. As a paralegal who spends my days drowning in documentation and details, I've always been meticulous about keeping records, something that would prove invaluable when my peaceful Saturday morning erupted into chaos. My landlord is this sweet older gentleman who inherited the property from his parents but moved to another state about 15 years ago. We have a great relationship. I pay my rent on time, handle minor repairs myself, and keep the place in good shape. In return, he's kept the rent reasonable and gives me freedom to make the place my own. Just last month, I finished building a small shed in the backyard with his blessing, and my vegetable garden was thriving after 3 seasons of trial and error. A few weeks before this incident, my landlord had called to check in as he usually does every couple of months. I've been thinking about selling the property eventually, he'd mentioned casually. Not right away, but maybe in the next year or two. You know I'm getting older, and managing properties from a distance isn't getting any easier. My heart had sunk momentarily, but he quickly added, "Don't worry though, you've been such a great tenant. I'd absolutely give you first dibs if you're interested, and regardless, I'd make sure you had plenty of notice if anything changes." I'd been saving for a down payment on a place of my own anyway, so the idea of potentially buying this house, a place I already knew and loved, was actually exciting. That Saturday morning in late April started beautifully. The weather was perfect, sunny but not too hot, ideal for tackling the yard work I'd been putting off. I was on my knees in the front garden bed, pulling weeds and planting new flowers, when I heard the crunch of tires on my gravel driveway. Looking up, I saw a gleaming white luxury SUV pull in. It looked ridiculously out of place on my modest street. The windows were tinted, but I could make out 2 figures inside. When the driver's door opened, a woman stepped out who looked like she'd just walked off the set of some reality show about wealthy suburbanites. She was probably in her mid-40s with bleached blonde hair styled in an elaborate bob, massive designer sunglasses, and clothing that screamed, "I spent more on this outfit than you make in a month." Everything about her exuded entitlement, from her perfectly manicured nails to her posture as she surveyed my home with obvious disdain. A man exited the passenger side, tall, well-dressed, but somehow faded next to her, as if he existed in her shadow. He hung back slightly as she strode purposefully toward me, her heels looking wildly impractical for a Saturday morning. "Can I help you?" I asked, standing up and dusting soil from my knees. She pulled her sunglasses down slightly, looking me up and down with obvious distaste. My old t-shirt and dirt-stained jeans clearly didn't impress her. "I'm the new owner of this property," she announced with absolute certainty. "The sale closed yesterday afternoon. I need you to hand over all keys and vacate immediately." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Excuse me?" "The keys," she repeated, extending her hand palm up. "I'd like them now. I have contractors coming on Monday to begin renovations." The man behind her shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I've heard nothing about the house being sold. I have a valid lease with the owner, and he assured me recently that if he ever decided to sell, I'd have plenty of notice." Her smile tightened. "Well, clearly he changed his mind. The property is mine now, and I need you out today." "Do you have any documentation?" I asked. "Proof of purchase? Because I can't just hand over keys to someone who walks up and claims they bought the place." This apparently was not the response she was expecting. Her face flushed slightly. "Do you know who I am?" she demanded, her voice rising. "No, ma'am, I don't. That's kind of my point." "I am not accustomed to having my word questioned," she snapped. "I paid good money for this... She gestured vaguely at my home, searching for words. "This dump, and I want in now." I pulled my phone from my pocket. "Let me just call my landlord and confirm." "That won't be necessary," she interrupted, producing a folder from her oversized handbag. "I have the paperwork right here." She thrust a document toward me. It did look official at first glance, lots of legal jargon and signatures, but something felt off. I noticed the man behind her shifting his weight nervously. "I'd still like to speak with my landlord directly," I insisted, already dialing his number. It went straight to voicemail. I left a brief message explaining the situation and asking him to call back urgently. "This is ridiculous," the woman declared. "I don't have time for this. Either hand over the keys voluntarily or I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing." "On what grounds?" I asked calmly. "I live here legally. I have a valid lease. I'm paid up through the end of the month." "On the grounds that I own this house," she practically shouted, causing a neighbor who was walking his dog to glance over curiously. Ma'am, I'm not giving you my keys based solely on your claim. I need verification from my landlord that the property has been sold and that my lease is being terminated. Her face contorted with rage. That's it. I've had enough of this obstruction. She pulled out her phone dramatically. I'm calling the police. Go ahead, I replied, starting to record our interaction on my own phone. I'll wait. The woman's husband, at least I assume that was their relationship, finally spoke up. Honey, maybe we should just come back with the real estate agent or... No, she snapped at him. I will not be denied access to my property by some squatter. She dialed cop, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Yes, I need police assistance immediately, she said in a voice that was suddenly trembling. I've just purchased a property and the former tenant is refusing to leave. I'm feeling threatened. Yes, he's being very aggressive. I'm afraid he might become violent. My jaw dropped at the blatant lies. I was standing a good 10 feet away from her, phone in hand, speaking calmly. The address? She recited my address precisely. Please hurry, I don't feel safe. She ended the call and shot me a triumphant look. The police will be here shortly to remove you. You realize you just filed a false police report, right? I said. That's a criminal offense. We'll see who's committing offenses when the police arrive, she retorted, folding her arms across her chest. While we waited, I tried my landlord again. Still no answer. I texted him as well, explaining the situation briefly. Then I went inside to retrieve my lease agreement, keeping an eye on the woman through the window to make sure she didn't try to follow me in. When I came back outside with my documentation, I noticed the woman was taking photos of the property while her husband stood by their vehicle, looking increasingly uncomfortable. About 15 minutes later, 2 police cruisers pulled into my driveway. I felt a flutter of anxiety despite knowing I was in the right. The woman immediately approached the officers as they exited their vehicles, launching into what appeared to be a tearful explanation. I stayed where I was, lease in hand, waiting for them to approach me. Sir, we received a call about a trespassing situation, one officer said as he walked over. His name tag read Officer Miller. Can you explain what's going on here? Of course, I replied calmly. I've lived in this house for 6 years as a tenant. This morning, this woman showed up claiming she purchased the property yesterday and demanding I hand over my keys and vacate immediately. I've heard nothing from my landlord about any sale, and when I asked her for documentation, what she showed me looked suspicious. I've been trying to contact my landlord to verify her claims. Officer Miller nodded. May I see your lease? I handed it over, pointing out the relevant sections. It's a year-to-year lease, last renewed 3 months ago. My landlord lives out of state, but we speak regularly. He mentioned possibly selling the property someday, but assured me I'd have first right of refusal and plenty of notice. The woman interjected. Officer, I have the sale documents right here. She thrust her folder at the second officer, who began reviewing the papers. Ma'am, I'll need to see your ID as well, Officer Miller said. She produced a driver's license, which the officer examined carefully. And you claim the sale was completed yesterday? He asked. Yes, at approximately 4 p.m., she stated confidently. We closed at the title company downtown. The second officer, whose name tag read Officer Chen, was frowning as he flipped through the documents. Ma'am, some of these pages appear to be missing signatures, and the property description doesn't fully match this address. That's just a clerical error, she said dismissively. The sale is complete. I have the right to take possession immediately. I spoke up. Officer, I pulled up my email history with my landlord on my phone. You can see here that just 3 weeks ago he mentioned possibly selling someday, but promised I'd have first notice and right of refusal. Officer Chen took my phone and scrolled through the emails, then handed it back. Sir, do you have a contact number for your landlord? We should speak with him directly. Of course, I said, providing the number. I've been trying to reach him myself. As Officer Chen stepped away to make the call, the woman began to look less confident. Her husband approached and whispered something in her ear, which she dismissed with an angry gesture. What kind of incompetent police force is this? She suddenly exclaimed. In my neighborhood, officers know to respect property owners. This is outrageous. Officer Miller's expression hardened. Ma'am, we're trying to sort out a complicated situation. Please lower your voice. I will not. Do you have any idea who my husband's family is in this town? We could buy and sell this entire street. I noticed both officers exchange a glance. Ma'am, Officer Miller said firmly, threatening us with your supposed influence isn't helping your case. At that moment, my phone rang. It was my landlord. I put the call on speaker. Hey there, his familiar voice came through. I just got your messages. What's this about someone claiming they bought the house? I quickly explained the situation while everyone listened. That's absolutely not true, my landlord said firmly. I haven't sold the property to anyone. I did have a woman contact me about a month ago expressing interest, but when I quoted a fair market price, she became aggressive and tried to pressure me into accepting about 70% of the value. I declined and haven't spoken with her since. Sir, Officer Chen said, leaning toward my phone, this is Officer Chen with the police department. Did you ever sign any sale documents or accept any money for the property? Absolutely not, my landlord replied. I did send her a sample of what the sales contract would look like if we proceeded, but that was just a template from my attorney with none of the details filled in. Nothing was ever signed. The woman's face had gone pale. Her husband had his head in his hands. That's a lie, she suddenly shrieked. We have a verbal agreement. You cashed my deposit check. Ma'am, I never received any check from you, my landlord replied calmly. And I certainly never made any verbal agreement to sell. Officer Miller turned to the woman. Ma'am, can you provide proof of this deposit? Bank records showing a withdrawal or a canceled check? She sputtered, It was a cash transaction. So there's no record of this alleged deposit? Officer Miller clarified. This is ridiculous, she snapped. I'm calling my attorney right now. She stormed off toward her SUV. Her husband finally spoke up. Officers, I apologize for this confusion. My wife sometimes gets ahead of herself. Sir, Officer Chen said, these documents appear to be altered. Some pages look like they've been taken from a template and combined with other documents. This could constitute attempted fraud, the husband paled. I wasn't involved in preparing any of this. She just told me we were coming to see our new investment property. As this conversation was happening, something clicked in my memory. I pulled up my doorbell camera app on my phone, scrolling back through the morning's footage. Sure enough, about 10 minutes before they had approached me in the yard, the camera had captured the woman trying to peek through my front windows and even testing whether the door was unlocked. Officers, I said, you might want to see this. I showed them the footage. Officer Miller's expression darkened. That looks like attempted breaking and entering. The woman returned from her vehicle, phone in hand. My attorney isn't answering, but he'll be hearing about this harassment. Ma'am, Officer Miller said, we viewed footage showing you attempting to enter this residence without permission before you spoke with the occupant. Combined with the questionable documentation you've provided and the confirmation from the actual property owner that no sale occurred, we have serious concerns about your actions today. This is absurd, she exclaimed. That camera is an invasion of my privacy. It's on my property, recording my front door, I pointed out. Perfectly legal. Officer Chen stepped forward. Ma'am, we need you to provide your full information. You could be facing charges including filing a false police report, attempted fraud, and attempted breaking and entering. The woman's demeanor suddenly changed. There's been a terrible misunderstanding, she said, her voice suddenly sickly sweet. I genuinely believed the sale was proceeding. The owner must have forgotten our arrangement. No arrangement existed, my landlord's voice came through my phone, still on speaker. And I'd like to know how you obtained those document templates from my attorney. I never sent you the final versions. The husband stepped forward. Officers, my wife has had issues with real estate deals before. We're currently facing a lawsuit in the next county over a similar situation. I've been trying to get her to seek help. The woman whirled on him. Shut up, you spineless idiot. I was handling this. Ma'am, Officer Miller said firmly, I'm going to need you to calm down immediately. What followed was a tense half hour of the officers taking statements, collecting information, and explaining the potential charges. The woman alternated between tears, threats, and attempts to charm her way out of the situation. Eventually, the officers instructed them to leave the property with a warning not to return, informing them that a report would be filed and further investigation would follow. As they drove away, the woman glaring daggers at me through the window, I felt a wave of relief mixed with disbelief. My landlord was still on the phone. I'm so sorry you had to deal with that, he said. Are you okay? I'm fine, I assured him, just a bit shaken. Well, I'm truly impressed with how you handled it. It reinforces what I already knew. You're the kind of tenant every landlord dreams of, he paused. You know, this whole incident has made me think. If you're still interested in potentially buying the place someday, I'd be happy to discuss it. No pressure, of course. Actually, I said, surprising myself, I've been saving for a down payment. I'd definitely be interested in talking about it. Wonderful. Let's set up a time next week to discuss details. After ending the call, Officer Miller approached me once more. You might want to keep an eye out in case they return, he advised. And if you're interested in pressing charges, here's the information you'll need. He handed me a card with case details. Thank you, I said sincerely. I appreciate how thoroughly you investigated instead of just taking her word for it. People like that count on authority figures not looking too closely, he replied. But the documentation speaks for itself, and your preparation made our job easier. The next few days were surprisingly tense. I found myself jumping at every car that drove by slowly, and I kept checking my doorbell camera whenever I got a notification. Officer Miller had been right to warn me. This wasn't over. 3 days after the incident, I received a call from a detective who wanted to follow up on what had happened. Apparently, this wasn't the woman's first attempt at something like this. We've been connecting some dots, the detective explained. Your incident helped us identify a pattern. This woman has tried similar tactics with at least 4 other properties in the county over the past year. What exactly is her game? I asked, genuinely curious about what she thought she could accomplish. From what we can tell, she targets properties that appear to be rentals, especially ones with out-of-state owners. She creates fake documents, then tries to intimidate the current residents into leaving immediately. In 2 cases, she actually succeeded, tenants with language barriers or without proper documentation of their lease arrangements. And then what? She changes the locks, makes quick cosmetic improvements, and tries to sell or rent the property before the real owner discovers what's happened. In one case, she collected first and last month's rent plus security deposit from a family, then disappeared when the actual property owner showed up. That's horrible, I said, feeling sick at the thought. Your case is helping us build a stronger case against her. The district attorney is considering pursuing multiple charges. I agreed to provide a formal statement and any additional evidence they needed. My meticulous record-keeping was about to pay off in ways I hadn't anticipated. A week later, I was still processing everything when my landlord called with news that made my jaw drop. You're not going to believe this, he said, sounding equal parts amused and outraged. That woman's husband called me. He wants to apologize and tell me what's really been going on. According to my landlord, the husband revealed that his wife had developed a bizarre fixation on flipping houses after binge-watching reality shows about real estate investing. But instead of following legal channels, she'd decided that intimidation and document forgery were faster routes to profit. She'd apparently been raised with extreme privilege and genuinely believed rules didn't apply to her. The husband says he's filing for divorce, my landlord continued. He claims he didn't understand the extent of what she was doing, but after your incident and the police involvement, he can't ignore it anymore. Apparently, they're facing significant legal problems, and she's still insisting she's done nothing wrong. That's wild, I replied, still processing this information. There's more, my landlord said. The husband mentioned that his wife specifically targeted my property because she saw the garden and improvements you've made. She thought it indicated an invested tenant who could be easily manipulated into believing they had no rights. The irony wasn't lost on me. My care for the property had made me a target, but that same attentiveness to detail had protected me. So, my landlord continued, this whole situation has made me realize I'm ready to sell sooner rather than later. Would you still be interested in buying? My heart raced. Absolutely. But I want to make sure it's a fair deal for you. I was thinking we could work out something mutually beneficial. You've been an excellent tenant, and I know you'll continue to take good care of the place. I'm thinking we could do a rent-to-own arrangement that counts some of your past rent toward the purchase price. It felt surreal. This nightmare encounter might actually lead to me owning my home. About a month after the incident, I was signing preliminary paperwork for a rent-to-own agreement with terms that favored both me and my landlord. As we wrapped up the call with his attorney, my landlord shared some community gossip he'd heard through a friend who lived nearby. Apparently, your Karen has become somewhat infamous in real estate circles, he chuckled. Nobody will work with her now. 3 different real estate agencies have blacklisted her, and word has spread to the neighboring counties too. Consequences for actions, I remarked. Imagine that. The best part? Her soon-to-be ex-husband is cooperating with authorities. She's facing multiple charges of fraud, forgery, and filing false police reports. From what I heard, she's still in complete denial, insisting she's the victim. 2 months after the incident, I attended a community meeting at our local library. The topic was real estate scams targeting renters, and I'd been invited to share my experience. What started as a terrifying confrontation had evolved into an opportunity to help others protect themselves. After my presentation, an older woman approached me. "Thank you for speaking out," she said quietly. "My neighbor's daughter was one of the people who fell for this woman's scam. They lost their security deposit and had nowhere to live for 2 weeks. Hearing how you stood your ground and what documentation saved you, it's important information. I learned that after my incident, the police department had worked with the district attorney's office to create a simple one-page guide for renters about their rights and what documentation to keep handy. They named it the Verify Before You Vacate program, and it was being distributed throughout the county. 6 months later, while going through the final steps of purchasing my home, I received an unexpected email from Officer Miller. The woman, whose real name I still didn't know, had pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and filing false police reports. She'd received a suspended sentence contingent on psychological evaluation, community service, and making restitution to her victims. Her husband had finalized their divorce and provided authorities with evidence of at least 6 other attempted property scams. According to the officer, the husband had told investigators that the confrontation at my house was the breaking point. Seeing his wife call the police and make false claims about feeling threatened had finally made him realize how far she'd gone. As I signed the final paperwork making the house officially mine, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude toward the entitled woman who had tried to bully me out of my home. Her actions had accelerated my path to homeownership, helped expose a scam that had hurt others, and even led to preventative measures that would protect vulnerable renters in the future. Sometimes I still check my doorbell camera more often than necessary, and I've upgraded my home security system just to be safe. But mostly I enjoy working in my garden. The very garden that caught that woman's eye, knowing that this house is now truly mine, documentation and all. The shed I built now has a fancy new lock, my vegetable garden has expanded, and I've added a small sign near my front door that only those who know the story would understand. No keys without proper paperwork. It's amazing how one Saturday morning confrontation changed everything, and how keeping careful records and standing my ground transformed a potential nightmare into the best possible outcome. I never imagined that someone trying to scam me out of my home would ultimately help me own it. But sometimes justice works in unexpected ways. The next one is a malicious compliances story. A few years ago, I was hired as a manager to create the contracts department of a tech startup. My boss was on an opposite coast as me, and we barely spoke. About a year in, the company hired consultants to overhaul depths except for contracts because it was running so smoothly. I was truly proud of this. The company sent me on a paid trip to the Bahamas as a thank you. After I got back from vacation, I asked for a raise to director level. My boss said I just wasn't there. I asked for a list of what I would need to do to be director. He sent me a list which was everything I was already doing and basically admitted that if I was director, he would no longer be able to take credit for my work. Friends told me I needed to either leave or put up and shut up. Instead, I chose to kill with kindness. I wholeheartedly apologized to my manager for overstepping, and said that I am going to step back into the manager role. I printed out the manager responsibilities and posted them to my desk. Things went south quicker than I could have imagined. We started missing sales targets. Product said my boss agreed to a term in an agreement that would completely destroy their budget and product rollout. My boss didn't know commission agreements and let sales manipulate contracts, so we were paying commission on contracts with termination clauses. I only interjected once to stop a contract amendment from being approved because my boss was unknowingly letting a VP artificially inflate sales numbers. The controller and CFO had to get involved. Eventually, the CEO was called in. Stories started circulating about my boss holding stress balls and cursing in meetings. I was more relaxed than ever, and during my newfound free time at work, I studied for and obtained professional certifications. I would also leave work early to get to the gym before it got busy. About a month after I unloaded my added responsibilities, my boss gave me a 7% bonus. It was unspoken, but I could tell he wanted me to take back on the director responsibilities without the title, but I continued to follow the manager description to a T. 6 months later, after taking 10 days of my unlimited PTO, I was included in layoffs, took 3 months off, and then got another job at a 35% salary increase. While I am happy to be making more money, I truly love the company and people I worked with, and it's defeating to watch someone continually take credit for your work. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This happened in the early 2000s when I joined a startup. We agreed on a salary and no paid overtime and an evaluation in 3 months and then annually. Standard stuff mostly. It was a very mediocre salary for the work, but I really liked work itself, which was extremely interesting and challenging. For me, even if the finances were so-so, I felt I'd learn a lot of skills which would be useful in the future. After 3 years and having 10 decent clients and a bunch of clients trialing and money rolling in, the talk turned to back pay and paid overtime plus compensating for past overtime. At that point, around $50,000 in OT had been accrued, which is a lot. Legally, it couldn't be back pay, so the talk was always of a discretionary bonus. Now, at this point, everyone is okay with this, myself included, and this was discussed in writing, via company emails too, so I felt secure and that no bad will was in play. I felt the company should be able to afford the payment. Equally, I'd happily settle for equity at a discount, which is legally possible there, if cash flow was an issue. The discussions about back pay, possible equity, and now started to drag on, and I was getting irked by this. In the end, I was made an offer of equity, which meant the company valuation was far beyond anything reasonable in the hundreds of millions, and I'd get a minuscule stake. Less than 0.01% of a company with 9 employees and a projected annual turnover of around 2 million. It was a FU of sorts to stiff me out of money, and I didn't want to take that lying down. To say I was furious was an understatement. Anyway, the day he made that offer, I handed in my resignation. This sent the CTO into panic mode because the CEO had refused an updated contract and I was still on a 1-month notice period, plus I had a lot of untaken paid leave. Basically, it meant I was walking out right then and there, so off I went that very same day, to the shock and surprise of everyone, I guess. The next day, I sent an official registered letter requesting my overtime/back pay and received a negative response, which I followed up with another detailed demand. This was also rejected because the bonus was discretionary and there is no overtime. However, I'd been seeking legal advice and I understood that they don't have a leg to stand on if I am willing to pay for an attorney. As the liability in such matters is firmly and 100% on the employer, I was willing. You need to understand that going to a lawyer was very rare in those parts back then, so companies didn't generally expect this outcome. Things have since changed. When going through the applicable laws with the attorney, I noticed there is a limitation of 7 years. So, while my attorney was laying out what to do in order to get me my money in as little as a few weeks, I just asked him, what if we wait until it's 6 years and 11 months after the transgression and then file demanding interest? I wanted this because the law stated that back pay is due at a 9% APR above the base rate, 3.25% at that time, accrued daily, for every day past the due date. We're looking at ~12-12.5% compound daily APR. The risk is that the company folds in that time, but I decided to take that risk. I sent one final letter stating that I expect all the owed and accrued amounts to date to be paid immediately. Of course, nothing happened. For the next few years, life rolled on. The company did grow and become a known player in the area. When the time came, I found an attorney and started the case. We had copies of all the communications, copies of the registered letters and responses. The back pay demanded now, including interest, was $112,000. What I didn't know was that in addition to this, that there are fixed penalties for each instruction to perform uncompensated overtime. The total demand was something like $135,000. To say that the CEO, who was still CEO, lost his *T would be an understatement. I got a very verbally abusive phone call which I dutifully recorded, as it wasn't completely unexpected, and was added to the filing. The CEO fought, or tried to, but when the judge heard the phone call, he took an immediate dim view. Reading through all the communication just put more nails in the defense's coffin. The judge just ruled and instructed the company to pay immediately and without delay, and also ordered the company to pay all my legal costs. They also got a full audit from the Department of Labor. The company paid up a week later. To add insult to injury the evening of the court's decision, the CEO apparently got very drunk and crashed his car into another vehicle while drunk. He got a DUI conviction and lost his driving license for half a year, and his insurance refused to pay out for the damages to his vehicle, brand new Mercedes S-Class, as he was drunk. All in all, a glorious day. The next one is an entitled people story. I live on a fairly large, around 4,800 acres ranch in Montana. I'm not a rancher and I don't pretend to be, but I inherited the ranch and leased most of the land out to people who know what they're doing. Now, when I took possession of the property, I had the boundaries reviewed and marked by a surveyor, and with my trusty ATV, I verified that the fence was intact all around my property and was marked no trespassing according to the law. Met my neighbors, tried to live quietly in the beauty I had. One day, coming back from town, I found 3 cars blocking my driveway. My driveway is a private, graded gravel road, about 1 1/4 miles long from my fenced, marked gate on the public access road. Nobody around, and because of the way the road was built with drainage ditches on either side, no way to drive around them and no way to drive past them. But I was about 3/4 of a mile from my house. I climbed up on my truck to see if I could see anyone around. No joy. Now, I considered just chaining onto the vehicles and towing them with my truck, at least until I can get by, but I figured I better get some witnesses, so I called it into the sheriff's office. Fortunately, the deputy on duty on my side of the county was fairly close by, so he swung by in a half hour or so. "Hey, Doc," he said. "I'm an emergency physician in the local hospital and know most all of the emergency responders. Bob, how's Charlie, his teenage daughter, who I had seen a few months earlier in the emergency department, doing?" "She's back to normal, thanks," he said. "What's up?" I pointed to the vehicles. "I came back from town and found these cars parked here. I don't know who they are, can't get past them, and can't see anyone around here. I'd like to get past them to get to my house." "Well, I can ticket them and order them towed, but the nearest tow truck is probably 2 hours away. Why not just tow them yourself?" "That's what I was thinking of doing, but I wanted a witness." "Okay, Doc, let me give you a hand." So we took some picture of all of it and towed the cars out of the way, which caused some damage to the road surface. Gravel, right? The damage is what really annoyed me. I had just paid the bill to have the road graded and more gravel added, something that has to be done every year or so on such roads. But I was able to get by, which was the important thing. The next morning, the cars were still there. And the next morning, so the cars had been there 3 days now, they were still there. I'd had enough. I drove out to the cars with some wooden cribbing and a high-lift jack, and jacked the cars up, put cribbing down, and left the cars there, wheels up in the air. It took 2 more days before anyone showed up. 8 people showed up, angry because their cars had been essentially booted. They really didn't like it when I told them they owed me for parking and damage done to the road because they blocked it. "You know this is a private road, right?" I asked. "We didn't know. You had to pass a closed gate with signs to get onto this road. Then you blocked the road because you were too stupid to park like an adult, blocked emergency access to my home. I should have had your cars towed, which the sheriff told me I could do. They started threatening me, saying they'd call the police. Go for it. Turns out they were backpacking and their phones had all died, so they wanted me to call the police. Fair enough. The deputy, Bob, again, showed up, and since he already knew the situation, their claims didn't get far. This time, I had Bob trespass them and escort them off my property. "They can wait for the tow truck on the public road," I said. "Also, Bob, I'd like to have their names, addresses, license numbers, and vehicle registration noted in your report for my lawsuit." "No problem, Doc." He took them to the public road, 3 trips. Called a tow truck, which took 4 hours to arrive. $500 fee per vehicle to lower them, I got the cribbing back, and tow them off my property to the public road. They were still trespassed. About a month later, I received notice they were suing me. Fair enough, I counterclaimed them in the local court. They were from Denver, which is a drive away. My lawyer laughed at their claims. So did the judge, and they were very unhappy when he ordered them to pay for resurfacing the road, again, plus storage and punitives. They threatened to appeal. My lawyer explained they were welcome to do so, but the appeal would still be in Montana, in the state Supreme Court. Montana doesn't have an intermediate appellate court, in Helena. In likely 3 years before it's scheduled, plus legal fees on their end, and their odds of losing were pretty high. Plus, we'd be including more legal charges, plus charges for their camping on my land, damages, etc. I found at least one campsite where they left trash around, including an envelope with their name on it. It took a year, but I got the payment from the 3rd hiker last week. I decided that the money will go to help pay for my annual summer BBQ for the county's emergency responders. 2 days of smoked brisket and the trimmings, games for the kids, swimming in my pool or my stream, and whatever. I do this every year since it's a small town. Small town living, so much better than the big city I originally came from. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.